The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. We've got plenty of things lined up for you this week in what has been a very exciting week of Bundesliga action. The title race may be near enough plenty. We've got a couple of special guests. We've got Reece Chambers, a freelance football writer and data analyst, coming on very soon to talk about players that he would pick out from the Bundesliga. And we've also got Playmaker Stats, Connor from Bats, coming on later on in the episode, towards the end, to talk about players and coaches that he thinks have made an impact in the Bundesliga. So, for all this, we've got various games. So, without further ado, stick with us and join in for this bumper-packed episode of the L15 weekly podcast. Let's get straight into it.
The L15 weekly podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions from the football world. Join me every Friday from 5 p.m. for a brand new episode of the L15 weekly podcast.
So let's get right into the action of the previous Bundesliga weekend, as there were plenty of games to have a look at from our perspective, and have a look at the game which we previewed in last week's episode, of course, which was Freiburg versus Bayer Leverkusen, which was a crucial game in many aspects. Crucial game in terms of European qualification. Freiburg, at the end of the day, are still chasing that European qualification spot behind Wolfsburg season, because they are in fact trying to claw themselves up to where Mönchengladbach are, where they are level on points but just have a slightly worse goal difference. They just need Mönchengladbach or Leipzig to drop some points, and they can sort of try and get themselves into the top four. I mean, Bayer Leverkusen in the end ran out winners with a solid defensive performance, it has to be said. The system again worked really well. That guy Kai Havertz scored again. I mean, a lot of people just look at him and think, he's going to be the next big thing. League football to persuade Kai Havertz to stay, because if they're still in the Europa League, it may not be quite an exciting, quite as tempting option to stay as it is to move to somewhere which undoubtedly would be Champions League clubs coming in for him. So I think to keep Kai Havertz and to keep him at the club, and to keep him as the as the main talisman in the team, they need to achieve Champions League football. I think if you're a top class player looking to get to the top of the game in Kai Havertz, then you need playing Champions League football. Bayer Leverkusen largely dominated this game, as they do, with 68% possession from them. They did have a couple of chances, but they just failed to put things away. I mean, it's sort of testament to how they've been doing since the restart. I mean, you talk about Schalke being the ones in bad form. Freiburg haven't won either. They drew 1-1 with Leipzig, with Frankfurt, and now have lost to Bayer Leverkusen. You talk about you want to put the focus on Schalke for being in poor form, but Freiburg as well, equally sharing the spoils at the moment with Cup. I think their European chase is running out of time, but they've got another difficult game against Bayer Leverkusen, Champions League rivals, in the game against. And Leverkusen are to play Bayern Munich very, very soon. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pick up some more points. I mean, Leverkusen have been in reasonable form apart from that loss against Wolfsburg, but you can only count that as a bit of a blip. But it'll be future games. So let's now move on to Saturday's games, and we will start with I think this is what you can call them, the informed team of the Bundesliga at the moment, which is Hertha Berlin. Them before Bundesliga, people have their own teams that they've sort of flocked over from English football, and I'm currently on loan at Hertha Berlin at the moment. They beat Augsburg 2-0 with Dilrosun and also Christoph Piatek, who got 2-2 now, so he may be starting to notch up a bit of form and start to justify the price tag that. But as terms of the game went, Hertha Berlin not ones to dominate, but they're not ones to dominate possession very often. But they are ones that are good at keeping the ball, and they're ones that are good at creating swift counter-attacking moves. That's proved by their 9 chances created, which is quite big, which is quite good. Java Dilrosun again scoring fairly decent goal from him. It reminded me a bit of the Özil Mesut Özil against Ludogorets in that Champions League game, when he just brings the ball down, takes it around 2 defenders, chips the goalkeeper. It was a testament to that, really. He was the man of the match. He produced some really good skills in that game, and then even the defence, really deserves a shout. Runemenning Alstein, played a decent game as well, with scaling that with Marko Grujic and proving that Hertha Berlin can be that sort of side that could break into Europe brackets next season. I can see them doing it. I mean, maybe even this season if they carry on with the form that they're happening. But anything's possible in the Bundesliga. But Augsburg carrying on that sort of poor run of form. I mean, they drew with Paderborn last week, and then beat Schalke the week before. So I suppose they're not going all so badly, but they need to sort of keep propelling themselves away from the relegation zone, or they could find themselves in a little bit of trouble. But in terms of Hertha Berlin, a really good game. The Hertha Berlin train just keeps on going, really. They keep picking up points and they keep picking up victories, and they are going to find themselves in a good position when it comes to being next season. I mean, Bruno just proves with a competent manager at the helm, Hertha Berlin can be in some really good form in the Bundesliga. We'll now move over to Mainz versus Hoffenheim, in which Mainz got a bit of a drubbing in this game. They only lost 1-0, but in terms of chances created, they did not create very many. I mean, Mainz, they're suffering down at the bottom with Düsseldorf. I mean, it could end up dragging them into it. I mean, they're only 1 point above Düsseldorf at the moment. Mainz at the moment are struggling. Their keeper really kept Florian Mullen kept them in it, really. They missed a penalty as well. Hoffenheim did, so they could have had even more. But Ilyas Bebu scored the goal for Hoffenheim. It was a fairly low maintenance game, fairly boring one, to be completely honest. But one that Mainz fans will look back on and think, why didn't we? We created some chances. We had shots on goal, but we just couldn't get the ball in the back of the net. And in terms of Hoffenheim, they'll be pleased with that performance. They're now two wins on the spin after not winning since the coronavirus outbreak. But it's pleasing to see them getting back into a bit of form, but not pleasing to see Mainz potentially being dragged into that relegation qualification zone. That happened over the weekend was Schalke versus Werder Bremen, which was a game that went in Werder Bremen's favour. Now, I actually watched this game, and again I found Schalke so out of sorts, lack of passion, a real lack of hunger. I heard from the commentators that if an alien, the classic, if you landed on which team would you think should be trying for Europe every year, you wouldn't be able to tell. Werder Bremen, even though they may not be the best ability side, I mean, they've got some really good players. I think Bittencourt, he's just he's got a load of talent, he's got it in his locker, but he just never seems to consistently perform. He comes up with moments of magic every so often, but he never seems to consistently perform. I mean, they were just so hungry for the win. Werder Bremen were. Oh, they were hungry and they won. They won rightfully. I mean, Schalke were really awful. They tried to. I don't even know what they were trying to do. They just couldn't get the ball down. Barrage from Werder Bremen keeping the ball, trying to make things happen, but they just couldn't. I mean, Werder Bremen were clearly the best side. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Schalke at the moment, but David Wagner, he's in the lurch a bit at the moment. I mean, it's a bit confusing as to whether he will stay at the club, but at the moment, no, I don't think he can. I mean, the players just aren't playing for him. The players just aren't playing whatsoever. I mean, Weston McKennie, it's often down to him to inject a bit of passion into the rest of the. There are an entire. There are 10 other players on the pitch, and you can't keep relying on Weston McKennie to make the impact every single game. It's not fair on him to be the driving force. I mean, he's a young lad. He's got plenty. He's young. He's 21 years old, and he can't be the one to be the only one providing any energy from the Schalke team. So it's interesting to see if David Wagner will stay at the club. But we'll move on now. Crucial. And another game in terms of European qualification, pretty crucial, with Wolfsburg versus Eintracht Frankfurt, which was over at the Arena in Germany. So in the end, the game went 2-1 to Eintracht Frankfurt. I predicted this one correctly, actually, on my Twitter account. I predicted that not only would Eintracht Frankfurt a bit of from AC Milan. I mean, it was a poor game in terms of the Eintracht Frankfurt. They just couldn't really get the ball in the back of the net. I mean, they'll be disappointed at that. They'll always be disappointed. If you've had more of the ball and you're not putting it in the back of the net, then it's going to be pretty hard. I mean, it's hard in terms of if Wolfsburg are keeping more of the ball, you'd hope that they'll be able to go forward and score, and they just weren't able to do that in this game. Scoring. I think he needs to, maybe, I don't know. I suppose he's only just come his first season, but Kevin Mbabu, he's showing some really promising signs. He's shown that he can do it in the top 5 lines of performing, and I mean, an average rating of 6.98. That's nearly 7. Over the course of the season is really good from a lad who's come from a Swiss league, not very well known to be fair. I mean, he was doing well in the Swiss league, but he's come into the Bundesliga and he's proved, and I mean that he thinks. But I mean, over the past few games, they haven't been notching up to the heights that they have. They've only scored 3 since the pandemic brought a restart in terms of Bundesliga. And now on to the final game on Saturday, which was an evening game between Bayern Munich and Fortuna Düsseldorf. I mean, we're running out of superlatives to use for Bayern Munich. They're just dominating the league. They've got this title wrapped up, realistically. I mean, unless any major slip-ups cause them to let this league go out of their hands. But they won 5-0 against Düsseldorf. I mean, they were just all-round class. I mean, keeping the ball well, 69% of possession, all the bigger chances, all the more chances, all the more shots, all the more accurate passes, all the more successful passes, all opposition. Fortuna Düsseldorf, they'd hoped they could put up more of a fight. They're around that area and they are in that relegation qualification zone, and they need to get out of it because time's ticking, I'm afraid. And with the Bundesliga, I mean, there's not very many games left for them to make it. At the moment, they're running out of time to get out of this zone. They've been in it for quite a while. An own goal from Nikolai Jorgensen, former Huddersfield Town player, opened the scoring. Pavard scored after 29 minutes. Then Lewandowski got a double, and then we're running out of superlatives to use for this man. But Alphonso Davies scored the final goal of the game. I mean, Alphonso Davies, you have a scouting team. For the guy to come from, I'm an MLS fan myself. I love watching the MLS. I think it's a rated league, and I think a lot of people should take a bit more respect to it. But Vancouver Whitecaps, he came from Vancouver Whitecaps, and if you didn't know, Vancouver Whitecaps aren't one of the best teams in the MLS. He wasn't, starting in any by any means. He not at all. He wasn't. I think he was the best player in Vancouver Whitecaps team. But Vancouver Whitecaps, they weren't bringing any. They weren't bringing any that MLS season of 2018. So you have to credit them. It's amazing how they just found him and thought, let's stick this guy at left back. He's a winger, but we'll stick him at left back. And Bayern Munich, and incredible how it's worked out, because he's now one of the biggest prospects in Europe, scoring goals, assisting goals, just being a general nuisance down the left hand side for Bayern Munich. And there were plenty of mistakes in that Fortuna Düsseldorf's side. I mean, own goals all over the shop. I think in performance, but unfortunately, Düsseldorf, they stay in that relegation qualification place, and it'll be difficult to see if they can get out of that. Because at the moment, I can't see them doing it. I can see Mainz doing something, but I can't see Düsseldorf getting out of it. Let's crack straight on with Sunday's games, and we'll go straight in with Borussia Mönchengladbach versus Union Berlin. In a game which went very heavily in the way of Florian Neuhaus, Marcus Thuram getting 2, and Alassane Player scoring 1. Berlin coming Stian Anderson. I mean, I've heard it around Twitter, but I agree. Union Berlin just can't do it without their fans. They're a team that are based really, the atmosphere of their games and things, and they need those fans to get through, and at the moment it's not doing them. At the moment, if they went into that relegation qualification place which they're only 4 points above, I can't see Union Berlin winning the relegation playoff against who. While we're on that topic, we haven't actually delved very much into Bundesliga 2, so we'll go over and we'll have a look at who's there. So at the moment it's Hamburg. So if Hamburg played played against Union Berlin, I think Hamburger would win. Simple as. I don't think that they could get through. I mean, they won the one to come up, Union Berlin, but I don't think they could win the one that could take them down. I mean, the fans are a crucial part of the Union Berlin cog, and at the moment they're not there, so they can't pull their weight really. I mean, at the moment, Marcus Thuram looking really good. I mean, I'm not letting you into a little secret, but once Reece comes on, he'll talk a bit more about Marcus Thuram and how he's been doing over this past season. But Borussia Mönchengladbach dominant in every department, 58% possession to Union Berlin's 42, 15 total shots, 14 chances created, 4 big chances. That's more than any of Union Berlin's. But they were just really good again. Borussia Mönchengladbach, Marcus Thuram, again showing everybody how it's done. And moving on to the other Sunday, which ended up Borussia Dortmund proving that they don't want to be counted out of this title race just yet. They are still 7 points behind Bayern Munich of the table. Paderborn. It's getting very close, isn't it, to Paderborn being completely and utterly out of this. Really, they're 6 points behind Werder Bremen. I mean, it's lucky that they're going to be able to, come back from this. I mean, Paderborn are going to be going straight down. I mean, the next match is another tricky test, really. They travel to RB Leipzig. I mean, Borussia dominated in the second half. Their chance cross was deflected into his path. Sancho scored a hat-trick on his return to the starting lineup with Hakimi and Schmel. They found a way back into the game when Hunemeyer scored a penalty, but it was thanks to a chance handball which came in. Thanks to that. Zingale made the error which came to goal. I mean, I don't know what he was doing for that goal, just sort of handing it over. But they ended up. It was a game where Paderborn looked fairly in it until they went on a bit of a rout in the last 15 minutes. Sancho scoring 71 minutes on the clock, Hakimi scoring after 85, and Marcel Smeltzer. What a collector's item that is! A goal for him in the Bundesliga after 89 minutes. And then 90 plus 1 minute, Sancho scored again. So it's sort of like a late whitewash where they put their, if I'm being completely honest, from Borussia Dortmund. I mean, they just showed exactly how to do it, and they just really put things to the sword. There was indeed also a game on Monday, also a game on Wednesday. But the game on Monday came between the Goats and the Bulls, which battle of the animals, if you like, which was between, if you don't know, FC Köln and RB Leipzig, which was a game that went in coming into the after the quarantine sort of period and before the shutdown of the Bundesliga. But they came in and they've come in strong against they won 4-2. Leipzig are up to third now, 2 points ahead. Köln, but meanwhile are still searching for their first win behind closed doors. Leipzig claiming what could be a vital win in the Champions League race. Werner put them 3-1 up early in the second half with Modest's stunner hauling Cologne back into it. However, Dani Olmo's first Bundesliga seems a common theme coming really in the Bundesliga, where where people keep missing gilt-edged chances, and Patrick Schick scored in that game. Christian Nkunku down scoring for FC Köln. I mean, no sign of Ut wherever he is. He wasn't in the side today, which was interesting to see. A bit weird, considering he keeps missing penalties day in day out. I don't know if he's injured or anything, but at the moment he keeps missing penalties, so maybe they're glad to see him out the side to make sure that he doesn't keep missing penalties for them. But in terms of Köln, they're just comfortably sitting around mid-table, shouldn't be dragged into any relegation dogfights. And Leipzig, they are hoping to just secure the Champions League high, but maybe they could finish second. But obviously they'll be working towards that, seeing if they can get that. Moving on to Wednesday's game, which came between, last night's game, if you like, came between Bremen and Eintracht from Silva and Ilsanker scoring 2 for Frankfurt, and they lost 3-0, and they're now sort of out of it. At the moment, relegation qualification place, Werder Bremen going to have a chance to stay up at the moment. I mean, they're collecting relevant points and they're collecting perhaps be beating. I mean, Frankfurt haven't been in the best form. I mean, they got battered by Munich when they came in, and they've been battered by Munich and Mönchengladbach, but they have been yet again that they are not the chosen ones to be put into the relegation zone, or indeed that relegation qualification place. So on this week's episode of L15 Weekly, I'm joined by freelance football writer Reece Chambers. Reece, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you, Louis. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. So before we've had this interview, I've asked you a couple of questions over email, and you've come and done some preparation work for me. So Reece, we've been focusing on the Bundesliga on the podcast recently. So firstly, which prospects would you pick out from the Bundesliga?
Yeah, so obviously, for anybody who's been watching the Bundesliga, it's been quite an exciting time for youth prospects. Obviously, you've got the likes of Jadon Sancho, Alphonso Davies and Kai Havertz, which is the big three, really. But then you've got players past that as well that might go a little bit under the radar or aren't quite as well known. So I've gone for three that people have obviously heard of, but there are three that I think could develop into the players that Sancho, Davies and Havertz are. So I've picked a defender, a midfielder and a forward. And my defender is Edmund Tapsoba, who plays for Bayer Leverkusen. He's 21 years old. Midfielder Christoph Baumgartner, who's 20, plays for Hoffenheim. And then the forward is Marcus Thuram, who's son of French legend Lilian Thuram, and he's 22, playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach this season.
So, starting with your defender in Tapsoba, why did you choose him as one of your prospects?
Yeah, well, I'll admit I didn't know too much about him before I started watching the Bundesliga in more depth. Obviously, since it's been the only league on.
Yeah.
But I've done more research into him, and he moved from Vitória Guimarães in the Portuguese league in January, so he's not played too many minutes in the Bundesliga. But he's he's a solid defender. His physical attributes, just when you see him, really, he's strong, physical. He's good in the air. He's everything you want from a defender. But then, if you watch him in a bit more depth on the ball as well, he's a very technical player. He can pick a pass, and that old saying that he's got good feet for a big man is quite a cliche saying these days. But for a defender, it's really important to be a good ball player, and I think he's got those sort of skills as well, and he's already shown those since the resumption of play.
And how good do you think that Tapsoba can be? What sort of potential do you think he's got in the footballing world?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because he's only 21, which obviously you've got the likes of Mbappe, Sancho, Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, that have kind of blown it out of the water for what we should be expecting from youngsters these days. But for Tapsoba, I think it'll be a case of see how it finishes this season, see how it starts next season as well, because we've only got a limited amount of minutes from a top 5 league in the Bundesliga for him. But he's shown some really promising signs, and he's got, like I said a minute ago, he's got all the attributes to become a really good defender. So obviously there are plenty of factors involved in how young players develop, but he's definitely got the attributes to become a world-class defender. And
with Baumgartner from Hoffenheim, why did you pick him?
It's the same with Tapsoba, really. I'd not come across him too much until he started scoring a few goals. I think he scored the other day, quite a neat little finish. But he's a midfielder. I've got him down as a midfielder, but he can play further forward as a attack. Well, he's primarily an attacking midfielder, but he could play as sort of a second striker as well. And I always find those players quite interesting because they've got so much versatility in where they can play. They could adapt into a proper 10. They could play as a central midfielder like he's done previously for Austria. Then he can possibly play further forward as well. Obviously, he plays for Hoffenheim, which is where Roberto Firmino started his top 5 career. So maybe I'm not saying he could turn into the player that Firmino can, because obviously he's a far way off that. But it's interesting to see that he's playing a second striker sort of role and trying to get into the box more and scoring. So he's definitely an interesting one to look out for. But again, same as any young player, obviously plenty of factors involved, and I think for him to get to the top, he's going to have to try and force a move away from Hoffenheim, because I know they're pushing for Europa League football at the moment, but if he wants to become a top player, he needs to get a big move as such. I don't know whether he's ready for that yet. Obviously, he's only 20 years old, so he's got plenty of time to develop, but as long as he can continue finding those pockets of space between the lines and producing good numbers, there's no reason why he can't carry on his development at a higher level.
Well, he's only really played this first season. This is really his first season properly at Hoffenheim. I mean, he's been playing for the second. He played for the second team last year, but this season was really his only real first professional season, really. So can he? Do you think he can make it right to the top if he, as you said, if he keeps going?
Yeah. It depends fully on. I think consistency is a big thing, isn't it, in football, and especially for a team like Hoffenheim, they produce some really good results. I think they won quite comfortably the other day, didn't they?
Yeah.
Struggling to keep up with all the results at the moment because I'm so out of sync with life in general. But I think teams like Hoffenheim, Freiburg, teams around there, they're good teams on their day. But it's all about that consistency. So for Baumgartner, I think he can become a top player, but it all depends how consistently he can register those performances, which is obviously a lot up to him, but a lot up to his teammates as well, because he plays in that sort of attacking midfield, second striker position where it depends on the service he's getting to be able to create chances. So plenty of factors to consider with him, I think.
And with Thuram, you talked about him as your attacking pick. Obviously, he scored yesterday for Mönchengladbach. Why did you pick him as your pick in the attacking spot?
Yeah, so I wrote a piece on Thuram, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, just when the season was restarted, and he'd scored an assist in his first game back. So I took a bit of a deep dive into his past, and I didn't realise that last season he was playing for Guignon in Liga, and he'd finished bottom with them. So it was a bit of a strange, what looked like at the time a strange signing for Gladbach, but he obviously came and they picked up a really good player in Thuram. He's got all the physical attributes to be a proper striker if he wants to be, but he also scored a lot of goals last season from playing off the left in a front three, and he's got all the technical attributes as well. He's good in the air, he's clinical in front of goal, and I think he's a really exciting prospect. He's still he's 22, so he's the oldest of the three that I've picked, but I think he's got out of the three, I think he's probably the most exciting, probably because he's a forward and you see him score goals, which obviously helps for youngsters, isn't it? But he's definitely a raw potential player, and it'll be good to see him develop in the future, I think.
Well, he's been often the focal point of Mönchengladbach's sort of push towards the Champions League spaces in the Bundesliga. A lot of eyes will be watching him in the if there is a summer window like normal. How far do you think Thuram can go with his game?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting one because, like you touched on there, he's been important for Gladbach this season, but he plays in quite a unique sort of setup because Marco Rose has got quite a good tactical brain with René Maris as well, who's his assistant there. I think he's 27, 28 years old, so they've got a really young, exciting managerial setup. And with Thuram, you've also got Alison Player, Lars Stindl, who plays as the 10, and Bolo as well. So they intertwine and they change around quite a lot, which is quite interesting to see. And I think if Thuram does want to make it to the top, I don't know if he'll have to specialise in one role in particular, because he scored the other day, didn't he, with quite an impressive header where he was in the box. But then that ball was played in from Player, who was on the left, so that kind of changed around the roles that we'd expected to see from both of them, perhaps earlier in the season. I think in terms of future destinations, I think he's pretty good at Gladbach at the moment. We can't forget that he's just only signed for them. I think he's got 3 or 4 years left on his deal yet, so the likelihood of him moving this summer is really low, not only from a financial point of view, but for him personally, jumping between clubs after one good season somewhere is probably not the best idea. he can get. I'm not too sure at the moment because we've obviously, I think we'll be a better judge at the end of next season, maybe when he's played a few more games. It depends if this team stays together because they've got quite a good setup at Gladbach. So if he can continue to shoulder some goal scoring and creative responsibility, same as the others, there's no reason why he can't consistently be at the top. And I don't know if he'll reach the heights that Sancho, Davies and Havertz have, but I think he's definitely an interesting one to watch. And I think obviously the fact his dad played for France and was such a legend there, and I think he won the World Cup with them, didn't he? So that puts a bit of, I'm not sure if it's expectation because they played in two different positions, but I think even the fact that he's got a dad who's made it right at the top level might be a helping hand, but it'll also lead to a bit more media attention as well, which is, as long as he's playing well, is only a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Reece, thank you very much for doing that for us and for coming on the podcast. It's been great to have you on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for asking me, and best of luck with everything else you do as well.
Thank you. Big thank you to Reece for coming on the podcast. You can go and check out some of his work, and you can check out his Twitter in the description below. Big thank you for him for coming onto the pod. To move on to previewing some of the games in the Bundesliga. After this, we will be speaking to Playmaker Stats is Connor, so we can speak to him afterwards. But firstly, let's have a look at how things are shaping up over this game. I mean, on Friday night, which is between Freiburg and Mönchengladbach, Freiburg again playing the Friday night kickoff and again playing a very good side who were fighting for Champions League football. So it'll be interesting to see how that between them and Mönchengladbach, with Borussia Mönchengladbach winning their last three matches against Freiburg. And then what I'd say is probably the biggest game of the weekend in terms of just big teams playing each other. I'll be watching, certainly. But Bayer Leverkusen versus Bayern Munich. One with a lot to play for in Leverkusen, and I think Bayern with certainly less to play for. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can get anything out of the game. But Bayern Munich, have won their last 10 matches. And Bayern Munich have scored 11 goals in their last two matches against Bayern Munich, which I'd say is fairly, likely that they'll put up a fight, but fairly unlikely that it may happen to come off. Big game including Mainz with Eintracht Frankfurt, where Mainz haven't lost in the last three meetings. So obviously Mainz will be looking to propel themselves away from the relegation. Team playing Borussia Dortmund at 5:30 on Saturday. Borussia Dortmund haven't lost to Hertha Berlin in the last 5 meetings, but Hertha Berlin, the form side in the league, really. It'll be interesting to see if they can beat Borussia Dortmund in this big game. And then another cracking clash, I suppose, on Sunday, which is in terms of Union Berlin versus Schalke. I mean, Schalke see if they can pick up some form against another uninformed side. It's sort of the battle of the ones that are going for a bit of a rot at the moment. Essentially, neither have won since Schalke have lost all four, but Union Berlin have at least got themselves a draw out of the games that have happened. So it'll be interesting to see who can get a win out of that one. Augsburg and Köln is the 5 o'clock kickoff on Sunday. Really be roped into that relegation battle if things get a bit difficult. But another very exciting weekend of Bundesliga action to be getting into. So let me know which ones. Let me know. Comment down below who you'll be watching this weekend. So hopefully you can participate. Comment down below who you think that you'll be watching this weekend. Who's your team, really, in the Bundesliga if you're rid of the coronavirus pandemic. So it is now time to welcome Connor from Playmaker Stats onto the podcast. Obviously, we've had Stephen on before from Playmaker Stats talking about other things, but this is Connor. He's going to talk about some of the Bundesliga. So let's hear what Connor had to say. If you are interested in more Playmaker Stats stuff, you can go and check out their Twitter and their website in the link below. So let's hear what Connor had to say about the players and coaches that he'd pick out from the Bundesliga.
Well, everyone was absolutely thrilled to see the Bundesliga return as Europe's first major league to get back to action. The title race was over before it even started with Joshua Kimmich's superb winner against Borussia Dortmund a match day ago. But when it comes to searching out underrated talent, the top two are a great place to start. And even though Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund boast arguably the two best centre-forwards in world football right now, in Robert Lewandowski and Erling Haaland, backed up by two of the best providers in Europe right now, Thomas Müller with 18 assists and Jadon Sancho with 16, It's the men assisting the assists that probably aren't getting enough credit. Thiago Alcantara has seen a new lease of life at Bayern Munich under new coach Hansi Flick, who's upped his defensive responsibility in all-round play, helping change Bayern's tempo to the extent that most teams they come up against are finding them unbearable to play against. Meanwhile, east from where I'm recording over in Dortmund, Julian Brandt's textbook technique and distribution are making Borussia Dortmund tick, allowing their frightening front line to do their best work. Both midfielders might be feeling they're a little underappreciated and experience a bout of Toni Kroos syndrome, where a move might get them the recognition they deserve, but many at their club see them as the key men in the quickly evaporating title race. Outside of the top two, the story since the league returned and really since the start of 2020 has been Bayer Leverkusen and Kai Havertz. And even though the midfield has been linked with literally every club in Europe after racking up more goals and assists than any player in Europe's top 5 leagues in 2020 in all competitions, the real story, in my opinion, has been at the back with Edmund Tapsoba, who they signed from Vitória Guimarães in January. The rangy centre-back has been an absolute phenomenon after arriving in Germany from Portugal in an €18 million move after just 4 months of first-team football. And outside of a freak loss to Wolfsburg, he's been the key man in Leverkusen, boasting some of the best form in Europe in 2020. Since his arrival in the Bundesliga, he's averaging more passes per game than any player in Europe's top 5 leagues, and right now it's hard to see the Burkina Faso native not progressing towards one of Europe's very best clubs in the next few years, whilst making Virgil van Dijk and Harry Maguire's eye-watering transfer fees look minuscule, as the richest clubs in football search desperately for that cornerstone central defender to turn their sides round. Leverkusen themselves have been playing some superb football since the turn of the year, and the man who started the recent revolution at Ajax, Peter Bosz, looks to have found a new home after his failed spell at Dortmund, where he gave up a 12-point league lead to eventual champions Bayern Munich. And that brings us on to the key storyline in the Bundesliga this season. It's not really so much about the players as it is the coaches. Whilst everyone is becoming increasingly aware of Leipzig phenomenon Julian Nagelsmann, whose tactical flexibility and skill in turning above-average players into world-beaters make him football's hottest coaching property, there's plenty of other names to keep an eye on. Marco Rose at Borussia Mönchengladbach is another talent picked up by the Red Bull machine, and after leaving Red Bull Salzburg last summer, he's steadily showing Nagelsmann levels, helping turn Gladbach into a Champions League level side with a squad of young pretenders playing smart and attractive football. We might even be at the point where anyone who's coached a Red Bull side gets taken away in an instant, akin to Huddersfield and others' obsession with Borussia Dortmund B-team managers that ended with the unfortunate spell under Patrick Sievert and started with David Wagner. Wagner, now coaching Schalke where I am in Gelsenkirchen, may soon be out the door, as if he fails to beat Union Berlin this weekend, he will have the unfortunate record of a 12-game winless streak, the longest in Europe's top 4 leagues this season, whilst former Schalke forward and Real Madrid legend Raul is being lined up as his replacement after impressing with Madrid's youth team. But as Schalke sink, there's been impressive performances elsewhere, namely from Bruno Labbadia at Hertha Berlin, who's managed to get a crisis club back on the straight and narrow, and from Florian Kohfeldt at Werder Bremen, who's showing he might be the next young German coaching phenomenon, taking a side low on confidence and certainties for relegation closer to survival, so much so that Schalke and Dortmund might well take a chance on him this summer. Which takes us back to the top with Borussia Dortmund, where Lucien Favre, whilst a well-respected improver of young players who can make a side play attractive football, isn't the winner Dortmund need to reach that next level, and likely won't be changing anytime soon at the age of 62. The loss to Bayern last Tuesday, and the comeback defeat to PSG in the Champions League, show he can be a great coach at getting a young side from point A and close to point B, but he's not the guy to take them over the top. However, someone who is showing that edge is Bayern coach Hansi Flick, the man you probably remember best from wearing matching outfits with Jogi Löw as Germany's assistant coach. He's so far mastering the art of stepping up from being an assistant when so many have failed in the past. Now boasting a record of 22 wins from his opening 25 games since taking over from Niko Kovac in November, on top of a complete thumping of Chelsea in the Champions League away at Stamford Bridge, Flick now has the best record of any Bayern manager in his opening 25 games, eclipsing that of Pep Guardiola. And with a new contract until 2023 announced during the coronavirus shutdown, it might not just be this mini title race that Bayern kill off before it even gets started.
Again, another big thanks to our friends over at Playmaker Stats, and very big thanks to Connor for coming on the podcast and talking all things Bundesliga. You can go And it brings us to the end of the podcast. We've covered so much in this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you can subscribe if you're new. Hopefully if you've enjoyed the episode and you've watched, you've got to this point, surely there must be something that you're enjoying. So I'd recommend pressing the subscribe button, pressing the subscribe button, and if a device you're on, you can click the notification bell. And you can also go and follow me on Twitter at L15weekly, and you can also go and follow me on Instagram at L15weekly. Feel free to drop me a message if you want to talk anything football, that's perfect. Or if you want to even come on the podcast, just drop me a message, no problem. And then also, I've been writing some pieces for La Gaceta, which is a Spanish football Gazette, Spanish Football Gazette, and I've been writing some pieces for them, so there'll be a link to that as well in the description if you guys want to go and check that out. I've written my first, wrote my first, go and have a look at that. And a very big thank you for joining the episode of the L15 Weekly Podcast. It's an episode number 21, so we've come a long way, and we've gained some real good watchers, and we've been growing as the weeks go on. So hopefully, if you're new, hopefully share this around as well, please. Get some more L15 Weekly Podcast. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.